So what does a keyed car actually cost you? The voice on the phone belonged to a man named Damien Holt, and he was not asking a genuine question. "Tell your husband to file a claim," he said, "if he even has insurance." There was a pause, the kind people leave when they want you to hear the contempt in the silence. He probably parks that thing at a body shop anyway. The car was a 1967 Shelby GT500, chassis number 6720F5A01013. It was one of 11 verified survivors in that configuration. The insurance writer alone listed it at $4.7 million. That wasn't the number that mattered. What did Damien Holt think he was keying when he dragged his keyring across the driver's door of that car in the parking garage beneath 1400 Meridian Tower? If this is the kind of story that makes you feel something, you are in exactly the right place. Hit subscribe, Real Stories Live here. I need to go back to the beginning. Marcus Vane was 31 years old when he registered the second holding company. He chose a name deliberately unremarkable, Callaway Meridian Partners LLC, and listed a registered agent in Delaware whose name appeared on approximately 600 similar filings that same quarter. The purpose was not to hide anything illegal. The purpose was to avoid a conversation he had already learned, at considerable cost, produced nothing useful. He had grown up in Bartow County, Georgia, in a house his grandfather had built with materials purchased over 4 separate trips to the hardware store because that was the only way the budget allowed it. His grandfather, a man named Russell Vane, had kept a leather-bound account ledger on the kitchen table every Sunday, and he had explained every line of it to Marcus beginning at age 7. Not because the boy asked, but because Russell believed that understanding money was the only difference between people who were used by it and people who used it themselves. Russell died when Marcus was 19. He left behind the ledger, a 47-acre property in Bartow County that had never carried a mortgage, and a principal Marcus had written on the inside back cover in his grandfather's presence during one of those Sunday sessions, "The moment a person knows what you have, they stop seeing you." Marcus kept the ledger. He carried it to college, to his first apartment, through 2 failed business partnerships, and one successful one that he had sold quietly at 26, for an amount his accountant described as somewhat extraordinary. He reinvested it without announcement. He lived, for the better part of 3 years after that sale, in a rented apartment in Decatur, drove a vehicle he had owned since college. A 1998 Tacoma with a cracked dashboard panel he had never bothered to repair, and wore the same rotation of 5 collared shirts to every meeting. His public-facing work was legitimate and visible. A small commercial property management consultancy, Marcus Vane Consulting, which he operated out of a shared office space on the 14th floor of a building he did not mention he owned. The consultancy was not a fiction. He took on real clients, completed real work, invoiced real fees. It was simply not the source of his income. It was the explanation he offered when conversations drifted toward what he did for a living, and it was true enough to satisfy the question without opening the one beneath it. He had learned this the hard way. At 23, he had trusted a business partner named Garrett with the full picture. Garrett had spent the following 8 months introducing himself to Marcus's private banking contacts, copying deal structures Marcus had built over 5 years, and ultimately poaching 2 anchor investors from a fund Marcus had spent 14 months cultivating. By the time Marcus understood what had happened, Garrett had used those relationships to close his own fund. No law had been broken. Nothing was recoverable. Russell's principle had been proven correct in the most expensive way available. So, when Marcus met Simone Aldrich at a fundraiser for a children's literacy nonprofit in Midtown Atlanta, he had written the nonprofit a check for $40,000, which appeared in the program under the name of Callaway Meridian Partners Foundation. A name Simone would not have recognized. He was already practiced in the particular skill of being genuinely present without being fully disclosed. Simone was 28. She worked in brand strategy at a mid-size firm and had a way of listening to people that made them feel their words were being taken somewhere safe. Marcus noticed this first, not her appearance, though she was striking, but the quality of attention she paid to a conversation. He introduced himself as a property consultant. She asked 2 precise questions about what that actually meant on a day-to-day basis, seemed satisfied with the honest answer, and moved on to a different subject without pressing further. He found this remarkable. They dated for 11 months before he told her he wanted to marry her. He had not yet told her the full picture of his finances. He had told her more than he told anyone, that the consulting was a simplified answer, that his holdings were more complex than he usually described, and she had responded to this with a directness he appreciated. "When you're ready to explain it, I'll listen. I'm not in a hurry." He believed her. He was right about her, for a while. The early years of their marriage were grounded in the specific, unremarkable texture of two people learning how to share a life. They bought a house in a quiet neighborhood in Buckhead. Marcus paid for it outright, though he structured the purchase through a trust and listed a monthly mortgage payment in their household budget to avoid the question. And Simone furnished it room by room over the course of a year, making decisions with the deliberate care of someone who understood that a house was a project, not a purchase. Marcus worked. Simone worked. They cooked dinner together on Sunday evenings and argued sometimes about small things and traveled once a year to somewhere neither of them had been. He told her about Russell. He showed her the ledger. He explained the principle written on the inside back cover, and she read it twice and said, "I think I understand why you are the way you are," which was the most accurate thing anyone had ever said to him about himself. For 3 years he was not afraid of what she understood. The shift did not announce itself. That is the aspect of gradual erosion that no one accounts for. It does not feel like change while it is happening. It feels like normal. It feels like Tuesday. Simone's firm was acquired when she was 32, and in the reorganization she was promoted to a director-level role she had not asked for, with a salary that more than doubled, and with it came a new peer group. The colleagues at this level lived differently, not extravagantly by any standard Marcus could have named as objectively excessive, but differently. The restaurants they chose, the neighborhoods they discussed, the cars in the parking structure attached to the firm's new downtown offices. Simone began mentioning these things at dinner in ways that were not complaints, exactly, observations. Comparisons that were technically neutral in phrasing but landed with a particular weight because of what was always implied underneath them. Bridget and her husband just bought in Tuxedo Park, she said one evening, lifting her fork without looking at him. She mentioned the school district. Marcus nodded. They did not have children yet, but the school district comment was not about children. He noticed but did not press it. He assumed it was a phase, the friction of adapting to a new environment and the social comparison that came with it. He was wrong about that, not in substance but in duration. It was not a phase. Simone's mother, Patricia Aldrich, had been present at the edges of their marriage from the beginning, a voice on the phone twice a week, an opinion about every decision that reached her in some form or another, but she had been, in those early years, manageable. Marcus had never used that word aloud. He had simply noticed that her disapproval had a range, and that, if he stayed within certain parameters, it remained at a background level that Simone could navigate without it becoming a disruption in their home. When Simone's professional circumstances changed, Patricia's range expanded. "Marcus seems like a sweet man," she told Simone during a visit in late spring of what Marcus would later mark as the 3rd year of erosion, not realizing he could hear the conversation from the kitchen. "But Simone, consultant is not a long-term answer. You've outgrown that situation." The word situation landed like a sentence. Marcus set down the glass he was washing and did not move for a moment. He heard Simone's response, something deflective, not a defense, and he understood something had shifted in his wife's private framing of their marriage. She had begun thinking of it as a situation. Patricia's visits became more frequent. She was 71, recently widowed, and had reorganized her social calendar around her daughter's professional ascent with the energy of someone who had found a new purpose. She brought opinions with her the way other grandmothers brought casseroles, in large quantities delivered without waiting to be asked, and intended to leave no leftovers. "That car in the driveway," she said during one dinner, gesturing in the general direction of the garage. "Is that the truck?" "It's getting embarrassing, Simone." The 1998 Tacoma was still in the driveway. Marcus had not replaced it. He saw no reason to, and he had other vehicles he used for other purposes, including the Shelby, which he kept in a climate-controlled unit at a private storage facility in Sandy Springs, and drove perhaps 4 times a year because it was a machine that Russell had described once, from a magazine photo, as the most honest car American money ever made. Marcus had purchased it 6 years after Russell died because it seemed like the right way to say something to a person who was no longer present to hear it. He did not explain the Shelby to Patricia. He did not explain it to Simone's new circle. He simply kept it where it lived and brought it out when the reason felt right. It was on one of those occasions, a clear Saturday morning in October, when Marcus had taken the car to a private automotive event at a warehouse facility near Doraville, that Damien Holt first appeared in their lives. Damien was introduced through a mutual contact of Simone's, a colleague named Preston, who had recently become a fixture at weekend social gatherings Marcus increasingly attended without genuine enthusiasm. Damien had arrived at one of these gatherings with the particular energy of a man who had rehearsed his own biography until the performance felt effortless. He was 41, led what he described as a boutique investment advisory, a phrase Marcus recognized as the standard vocabulary of someone who managed other people's money at fees that could not survive direct examination. And he drove a white Ferrari 296 GTs that he parked at the curb rather than in the lot. A positioning choice that told Marcus everything about the car's actual function. He introduced himself with the firm handshake of a man who had read that firm handshakes communicated authority. And then he scanned Marcus with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent years sorting rooms into relevant and irrelevant columns. Marcus registered as irrelevant inside approximately 4 seconds. Property management? Damien said when Preston introduced Marcus's consultancy. He nodded with the expression of a person receiving information they will not store. Solid work. He turned toward Simone with a different face entirely. Attentive, curious, asking follow-up questions about her firm's restructuring with a fluency that suggested he had done some preparation. Which he had. The Ferrari watch was a Patek Philippe Nautilus in rose gold, reference 5711. Worth approximately $40,000 on a good secondary market day. Marcus noticed it. He noticed it not because it impressed him, but because it told him something about the performance Damien was running, and performances always indicated a motive. Over the following 6 weeks, Damien Holt appeared at every gathering Simone attended through her professional network, 3 dinners, 1 charity auction, 2 weekend events that Marcus had declined. Simone mentioned him in passing in the particular neutral register she used for things she was not ready to discuss directly. Damien was there. Damien knows Preston from New York, apparently. Damien said something interesting about the commercial real estate market. You'd probably know more about it than he does. That last sentence was the tell. The comparative diminishment dressed as a compliment. Marcus said nothing. He set the knowledge down like Russell had once taught him to set a problem, somewhere visible but not urgent, where he could return to it when the shape became clearer, 3 weeks after that dinner conversation. Damien Holt's company submitted a lease inquiry for office space at 1400 Meridian Tower. Marcus owned 1400 Meridian Tower. The discovery arrived in 2 pieces, and it was the combination of them, not either one alone, that produced the particular quality of stillness Marcus felt when he finally understood what he was looking at. The first piece was financial. Marcus reviewed his property portfolio on the 14th of every month, a habit Russell had instilled in him under the simpler name of checking your work. The review was thorough by design, not delegated, not summarized, examined directly. He used a secure platform his attorney had helped him establish, and every tenant, every transaction, every communication that had entered or exited the portfolio's management layer in the previous 30 days was visible to him. The lease inquiry from Holt Capital Advisory, the name of Damien's boutique operation, had been flagged by his property management team as a standard commercial application. Standard credit check, standard financials submitted. Marcus opened the file on the evening of October 14th, in the home office he used after Simone had gone to sleep, with the LED desk lamp casting its familiar orange rectangle across the blotter. Holt Capital Advisory's submitted financials showed assets under management of approximately $12 million, 3 anchor client accounts, and a commercial lease history at 2 prior addresses in Buckhead. It was a credible file for a small advisory. Marcus was not reading it for credibility. He was reading it because he had spent 17 years learning to read financial documents the way a diagnostician reads an imaging result, not for what was present, but for what was absent in a place it should have been. What was absent across all 3 pages of Holt Capital's submitted balance statement was any mention of a primary banking relationship. The accounts listed were secondary, a money market, a brokerage clearing account, a line of credit from a bank Marcus recognized as one that specialized in clients who needed presentation-quality paperwork without excessive scrutiny. The primary bank, the institution that would hold the operating account, the payroll account, the receivables, was not there. It was a gap of the specific kind created by one specific scenario. The primary account had not been omitted by accident. It had been omitted because its contents would not survive examination. Marcus forwarded the application file to Cecilia Frost, the attorney who had handled his portfolio structures for 9 years, with a note that contained 3 words, "Please look closer." He closed the laptop and sat with the lamp for 11 minutes. The second piece arrived 18 days later, not through any document, but through the particular geometry of a Saturday afternoon. Simone had told him she was meeting a colleague named Lauren for lunch and would likely be home by 4. Marcus drove the Shelby that morning. It had been 6 weeks since he had brought it out, and the October temperature was finally appropriate, and returned to the storage facility by noon. He took a different route home than usual, a decision that had no particular reasoning attached to it. Convenience, perhaps, or the idle preference for a different street. He passed the parking structure beneath 1400 Meridian Tower at 12:47. The white Ferrari 296 GTS was parked on level 2. He knew because he recognized the plate which he had noted at the curb outside the first gathering where Damien had appeared. He also knew because level 2 of that structure was accessible on a Saturday only with a tenant access credential or a visitor pass issued by a tenant with active lease rights. Holt Capital Advisory's lease had not yet been approved. No visitor credential had been issued. He did not stop. He continued home. Simone arrived at 4:17. Carrying a shopping bag from a home goods store she said she had stopped at after lunch. He did not ask about Lauren. He already knew Lauren was in Charlotte that weekend. She had posted about it 3 days earlier on a professional networking platform Simone also used, where Marcus had a secondary account under a name that appeared on no other document connected to him. He set the knowledge down again, and then he called Cecilia Frost. She answered on the second ring, because she always answered on the second ring, and she said, before he could speak, "I was going to call you tomorrow." "Tell me," Marcus said. "The primary account," she said, "belongs to a holding company called Meridian Access Group. The holding company has no operating history. It's 8 months old. But it's listed as a co-borrower on a commercial real estate credit facility that was originated 4 months ago." She paused. "The credit facility uses a property in this portfolio as collateral." The property in question was a mixed-use development in West Midtown that Marcus had held for 6 years under Callaway Meridian Partners and had not encumbered with any debt since its original acquisition financing was retired in year 3. Its current appraised value was $11.4 million. Someone had used it as collateral without his authorization. By accessing documentation that should not have been reachable, and that documentation would have required, at minimum, access to the internal file structure of his property management platform. There were 4 people with access to that platform. 3 of them were Marcus's employees of long standing. The 4th was Simone, who had been given a limited viewer credential 18 months earlier when she had handled a single administrative task on his behalf during a period when he was traveling. A viewer credential did not permit document downloads or external sharing. Simone's credential log showed 43 individual file accesses over a period of 14 weeks. The first access had occurred 9 days after Damien Holt's introduction through Preston at the gathering where the Ferrari was parked at the curb. Marcus sat at the kitchen table with the printout in front of him. The overhead light was off. The lamp above the stove was on, which was the setting Simone used when she was working late at the island. And he had not changed it because changing it would have required him to move, and he was not ready to move. He looked at the number of accesses. 43. Each one documented with a timestamp, a file path, and a session duration. He felt something that sat below anger in the body, heavier, slower, occupying the chest without the useful energy anger provides. He felt it the way you feel a structural problem, not a surface one. 43. He thought about the Sunday ledger sessions. He thought about Russell explaining every line. He closed the folder. He called Cecilia again. "I need Oliver," he said. Oliver Reed was a forensic accountant Cecilia kept on retainer for situations that required the specific skill of making malfeasance visible in terms a courtroom could process. And I need you to start building the full picture before either of them knows we're looking. Already started, Cecilia said. How long do we have? Marcus looked at the stove light. As long as it takes to do this correctly. Cecilia Frost had been his attorney for 9 years and had during that time developed a working theory of Marcus Vane that she had never stated aloud but which informed every conversation they had. He was a person who never moved until he could see the whole board, and once he moved, he did not move twice. She had watched him navigate 3 separate adversarial situations over the years with the same quality of methodical, unhurried attention, and the results had been consistent in their completeness. She did not question the timeline, she simply began working. Over the following 12 days, she and Oliver Reed constructed a timeline that Marcus reviewed in sections. The way you read a report you already know will be damaging, not fast, not slow, but with the particular attention of someone who owes the truth the dignity of being understood fully rather than absorbed and filed away. The Meridian Access Group Holding Company had been formed 8 months prior by a registered agent in Nevada whose name also appeared on 41 similar entities formed in the same quarter. A pattern Oliver described as factory incorporation, the mechanism by which entities are created specifically to obscure ownership chains until needed. The sole beneficial owner of record, visible only at the deepest filing layer, was a trust whose beneficiary designation pointed to a management company in the Cayman Islands. The management company in the Cayman Islands had, as its listed contact, a Miami address that corresponded to a mail forwarding service. The mail forwarding service had as a registered mail recipient Damian Kyle Holt. The credit facility using Marcus's property as unauthorized collateral had been used to access a line of $7 million. $3 million of that line had been drawn, transferred through 2 intermediate accounts, and deposited into an operating account at a private bank in Nassau over a period of 41 days. Oliver laid the document showing the Nassau deposit on the table during a meeting at Cecilia's office and said, "Without ceremony, this is wire fraud. It's also forgery. The collateral authorization document has a signature that is not yours, executed on a notarization date that predates the actual filing by 6 days, which is a physical impossibility if the notary was present." Marcus looked at the signature on the authorization document. It was close. It was not close enough. "Who signed it?" he asked. Oliver set a second document next to the first. It was the access log from Marcus's property management platform, sorted by session and file path. The authorization document's file name appeared in the log on a date 8 weeks prior to its submission to the lender. Session user Simone Vane. Marcus did not say anything. Cecilia did not fill the silence with comfort or professional courtesy. She had known him long enough to understand that this moment required exactly what it received. Nothing except the room and the time to absorb it. After 4 minutes, Marcus said, "What do we need to build the full criminal referral?" "We have most of it," Oliver said. "The lender's records, the title company records on the collateral document, the platform logs. What we don't have yet is the communication chain between Holt and your wife. We need to demonstrate coordination, not coincidence." Marcus thought about the Saturday, the parking structure level 2, the plate he had memorized. "I can give you a specific date and a specific location," he said. "The Ferrari will be on the level 2 security tape from October 14th. Oliver wrote the date down. "Also," Marcus said, "I need to know about the employees at 1400 Meridian. How many people work in that building on an average Tuesday?" Cecilia looked at him. "Why? Because I need to understand what I'm protecting before I decide how to move," Marcus said. Oliver checked his notes. "Your anchor tenant alone runs a team of 214. The full building roster, based on the lease agreements, is approximately 740 employees across all tenants." Marcus nodded. He did not write anything down. He kept the number in the front of his mind, 740, and used it the way Russell had taught him to use numbers, as an anchor against the pull of acting from anger rather than from purpose. The following morning, he received an email from his property management team informing him that Holt Capital Advisory had requested an expedited review of their lease application. citing a pressing timeline and asking if Marcus would consider a brief personal meeting to discuss terms. He replied through his property manager that he would be happy to schedule something appropriate. He did not mention that he had already scheduled the appropriate thing and that it would not look like a leasing meeting. The event was a commercial property investors forum, the Meridian Investor Summit, an annual gathering Marcus had hosted for 7 years under the Callaway Meridian name, staged at the Grand Hyatt Ballroom in downtown Atlanta. 208 attendees, developers, institutional investors, fund managers, attorneys, lenders, and, because Marcus had made one additional call 3 weeks prior, 2 senior agents from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division who were attending as registered guests of the host. It was, by any visible measure, a standard industry event. Cocktail reception, dinner service, a keynote remarks segment, and a deal flow presentation that Marcus had delivered every year and which attendees found valuable enough that the registration list had grown by 31% over the previous year's total. Damian Holt had been invited through Preston, who sat on the forum's industry advisory panel and whose invitation rights allowed him 2 guest registrations. Damian had RSVP'd within 4 hours of receiving the invitation, which told Marcus everything he needed to know about Damian's read of the situation. He believed this was an opportunity he was being presented with, not one he was being led toward. Simone attended as Marcus's guest, as she had every year. She had asked 2 weeks prior whether she should come, in a tone Marcus had noticed was slightly more careful than her usual directness. He had said yes, of course, without any additional weight in the words, and she had nodded and moved to a different subject with the practiced neutrality of someone who was carrying something they had decided not to put down yet. Patricia Aldrich was not on the guest list. She was, however, aware of the event, because Simone had mentioned it in their standing Tuesday phone call. And Patricia had expressed her traditional complex of opinions about it, primarily that Marcus should leverage it more aggressively for visibility, a suggestion she delivered without any apparent awareness of the irony it contained. Marcus arrived at the Grand Hyatt Ballroom at 6:15. Cecilia was already there, at a table near the east wall. In the tailored charcoal blazer she wore when she needed to look like a guest and function like a professional simultaneously. Oliver Reed was in the adjacent corridor with 2 members of the property management team and the stack of documentation they had assembled: original filings, access logs, the forensic accounting summary. The title company's written confirmation that the collateral authorization bore a forged signature. Everything was organized in the order it would need to be produced. The 2 FBI agents, a woman named Special Agent Dana Moorfield and her partner, whose name Marcus had been given but had filed away, were seated at a table near the center of the room with 2 other guests who were, in fact, members of Cecilia's firm's litigation team attending in a non-practice capacity. Marcus greeted them as he would greet any guests, warmly, briefly, without ceremony. He then moved through the reception with the particular ease of a man who had been comfortable in rooms like this for long enough that it required no performance. Damian Holt arrived at 6:49. He wore a navy suit Marcus recognized as bespoke. The lapel roll and the chest suppression indicated a tailor who worked at price points that implied ambition, and the Patek Philippe was on the left wrist, which was the wrist you led with when extending your hand. He scanned the room with the same efficiency Marcus had observed at that first gathering, and when he located Marcus, he crossed the room with the confident trajectory of a man who had decided he was the most important person in it. "Marcus," he said with the handshake. "Incredible room. This is your event?" "Every year," Marcus said. He kept his expression pleasant, open, unhurried. "I'm glad the timing worked out for you." Damian smiled the smile of a man who had received a gift he expected. Wouldn't have missed it. "I was actually hoping we'd have a chance to talk about Meridian Tower tonight. Preston mentioned you're the decision-maker on the lease." "I am," Marcus said. "But let's get through the reception first. There's someone I want you to meet." He led Damian toward the east wall. Cecilia stood as they approached, with a smile that was entirely professional and a posture that had the specific quality of someone who has been waiting patiently for a long time. "This is Cecilia Frost," Marcus said. "She handles the legal structure on all of my properties." Damian extended his hand. "Damian Holt. Good to meet you." "Mr. Holt," Cecilia said. "I've been looking forward to this." The seating arrangement placed Damian 3 chairs from Marcus at the main table, with Simone across from Marcus in her usual chair. Patricia was not present, but she had sent with Simone that morning a set of note cards with talking points about making connections that Simone had tucked into her clutch without reading. Marcus knew because he had seen her do it. Dinner proceeded normally. The first course was served. Conversation moved across the table in the usual patterns. Marcus ate with the measured appetite of a man who has no particular weight on his mind, which required more control than he acknowledged to himself. At 8:22, Marcus set his fork down, pressed his napkin to his mouth, and stood. The room quieted, as it always did at this point in the evening, because the attendees had attended long enough to know that when Marcus stood at 8:22, the keynote remarks were beginning. "Thank you all for being here," he said. 7 years ago, this forum started with 11 people in a conference room in Decatur. Tonight there are 208 of you, and the quality of what this community has built together is something I'm genuinely proud to be part of. He paused. He looked at the table. He looked at Damien. "This year, I want to do something a little different," he said. "Instead of my standard presentation on deal flow, I'd like to talk about something that came to my attention recently. A situation that I think everyone in this room, everyone who operates in commercial real estate or investment management, should understand clearly." He nodded to the door at the east end of the room. Oliver Reed entered with a rolling cart carrying a document distribution. Printed packets, one per seat, already positioned by the event team during the dinner service. The packets were placed face down. "You can turn those over," Marcus said. 208 people turned over packets that contained a summary of Meridian Access Group's incorporation, the forensic accounting timeline showing the unauthorized credit facility, the forged collateral authorization document with an expert notation identifying the signature as fraudulent, and the access log from Marcus's property management platform with the relevant session dates and user credentials highlighted in yellow. Simone turned hers over. Marcus did not look at her immediately. He watched Damien. Damien's face moved through 3 distinct phases in approximately 4 seconds. The first was the confident confusion of a man who has not yet processed that he is the subject of the document. The second was the specific compression of expression that Marcus had seen on faces in rooms before when the understanding arrived. The third was a stillness that was not composure, it was the temporary paralysis of a person whose options had just reduced to near zero simultaneously. The entity described in that packet, Marcus said, in the same measured voice he used for every sentence of every presentation he had ever given, used forged documentation to access a $7 million credit facility, drawing $3 million, using a property I own as unauthorized collateral. He paused. The beneficial owner of that entity is a man named Damien Kyle Holt. The room had the quality of a space from which all ambient sound has been removed. Not silence exactly, the ventilation was still running, someone's glass was set down, but the particular acoustic weight of 208 people making no voluntary noise. He is currently seated at table 4. No one looked at table 4. No one needed to. Every head was already there. Damien Holt pushed his chair back approximately 8 inches. It was not a full stand, it was the abortive movement of someone who could not locate a direction to move toward. "Marcus," he said. The word was the sound of a performance collapsing inward. "Mr. Holt," Cecilia said from the east wall, in a voice that carried precisely to table 4, "Special Agent Moorfield would like a word." Special Agent Moorfield stood from her table and crossed the room with the economical movement of someone who does this particular thing regularly and finds it neither dramatic nor routine, simply the motion between point A and point B. Damien stood fully this time. He looked at Marcus. He looked at Simone. "You don't understand what you're signing," Marcus said. And it was exactly what Damien had said on the phone, the 4 words he had used about the lease paperwork in a conversation he'd had with Simone 3 weeks prior, a conversation that had been recorded through the platform's integrated call logging feature on a line he had used to discuss the application. Marcus had listened to that call 47 times in 11 days. "Get out." Damien looked at him for a moment longer. Then he looked away, which was the first honest thing he had done in Marcus's presence. Special Agent Moorfield extended a hand toward the corridor. Damien Holt walked out of the Grand Hyatt Ballroom at 8:31 on a Thursday evening with 206 people watching. and 4 people in the room knowing that the Shelby GT500 in the parking garage of 1400 Meridian Tower, the car with the keyed driver's door, had been brought there that afternoon. Not for any particular reason. Only because Marcus had wanted it where Damien would see it when he arrived and understand for the first time that he had never been able to read what he was looking at. The car was insured for $4.7 million. The building beneath it, owned outright through Callaway Meridian Partners, was valued on the most recent institutional appraisal at $1.1 billion. Marcus owned 18 such properties across 6 states. Damien had keyed the car of a man whose net holdings exceeded $15 billion. In the parking garage of a building that man owned and had believed the entire time that he was operating somewhere above him. The formal unraveling moved on a timeline that Oliver Reed described when Marcus asked him for a projection, as faster than most, slower than you'd prefer. This was accurate. The federal wire fraud referral was accepted within 9 days of the forum. The FBI's Financial Crimes Division had, as it happened, an existing file on Meridian Access Group from a separate complaint filed by a private lender in Tennessee who had encountered a similar collateral arrangement 7 months prior. Marcus's documentation accelerated what had already been a developing investigation into a prosecutable case. Damien Holt retained counsel within 24 hours of leaving the forum. His attorney, a criminal defense practitioner in Atlanta whose clientele trended toward white-collar situations, issued a statement through a spokesperson describing the allegations as based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the complex financing structures involved. This statement was reproduced verbatim in one trade publication and summarized in 2 others. It was not, by any visible measure, effective. The Cayman Islands Management Company, the entity at the end of the chain that pointed back to Damien, was the subject of a parallel inquiry by the territory's Financial Intelligence Authority. A process Cecilia had initiated through her firm's international regulatory contacts 4 days before the forum. The mechanism by which this inquiry was triggered and the speed with which it was filed remained invisible to Damien and his counsel until the discovery process began and the timeline became apparent. The Nassau account holding the $3 million in drawn funds was frozen on day 14. On day 21, a second entity connected to Damien, a Delaware LLC named Holt Property Solutions, was identified by Oliver's forensic team as the entity that had transmitted the forged collateral authorization document to the lender. The transmission record, retrieved through a subpoena to the lender's document management vendor, included metadata showing the document had been originated on a device registered to a Miami IP address that corresponded to Damien's secondary residence. The gap between the notarization date on the document and the actual transmission date, 6 days during which the notarization could not have occurred, was, as Oliver had described in his initial report, a physical impossibility. The expert analysis confirming the signature as fraudulent was entered into the federal record on day 33. Preston, the mutual contact who had introduced Damien into Simone's professional circle and had provided the forum invitation, had not. As far as the investigation could establish, participated in the scheme with knowledge of its specifics. He had been, in the more benign interpretation, a useful social bridge who had not asked the questions he should have asked. He retained his advisory panel position at the forum, though Marcus noted, with the particular precision of someone who pays attention to details others let pass. That Preston's tone in all subsequent communications had the careful quality of a person who had learned something instructive about the cost of incuriosity. The white Ferrari 296 GTS was repossessed by its financing company on day 44. The lease on Damien's office suite in Buckhead, not 1400 Meridian Tower, which he had never succeeded in securing, was terminated by his landlord on day 51 following a non-payment notification. The Patek Philippe Nautilus appeared on a secondary market platform on day 62, listed at a price that suggested the seller was not in a position to wait for the right buyer. Holt Capital Advisory's 3 anchor client accounts, the ones listed in the initial lease application, were each, independently, in the process of withdrawing their assets under management by day 70. Marcus did not know how this became known to the clients so quickly. He suspected that information moved through certain professional networks at a pace its originators did not anticipate, and that Cecilia had friends in those networks who valued transparency. On day 88, Damien's counsel entered into preliminary discussions with the federal prosecutors about a cooperation agreement. The terms were not public. the direction was. Marcus spent those 88 days working. He reviewed the portfolio. He met with his property management team. He had 3 dinners with Oliver Reed to confirm the forensic accounting was complete and internally consistent. He did not attend any social gatherings. He ran in the mornings, a habit he had maintained for 11 years, along the same route in the same shoes until they needed replacing, which they did in week 9 and which he replaced with an identical pair without notable interest in the occasion. The conversation with Simone happened at day 11. Not the first conversation, there had been one on the night of the forum, in the car on the way home, which had the quality of 2 people who are too close to something to see its full shape yet. The conversation at day 11 was the one that contained the relevant facts, stated without ceremony, and her response to them. She sat at the kitchen table, the same overhead light off, the lamp above the stove on. Because she had always used that setting and some things persist past the circumstances that established them. The access log printout was on the table. The dates were visible. She did not reach for it. "I didn't know what he was doing with them," she said. "I know," Marcus said. This was true. The evidence was clear on the specific nature of her access. She had retrieved files, had transmitted them, had not understood the mechanism by which they were being used. She had been, in the most precise legal sense, exploited rather than complicit. This distinction had been important to establish, and Cecilia had established it thoroughly, because it was the truth and because it determined the shape of what came next. "He told me he was researching competitive properties," she said. "He said he was evaluating whether 1400 Meridian made sense for his expansion." "And you believed him," Marcus said. She did not answer immediately. She looked at the lamp. "I wanted to," she said finally. "Which is different." Marcus sat with that for a moment. "I know," he said again. What followed was not a single conversation but a series of them, spaced across 5 weeks, in which the full shape of 3 years of erosion, the dinners with the school district comments, the parking structure on a Saturday, the 43 access log entries, the comparison and the distance and the gradual reorganization of her understanding of their life together was laid out between them with the particular honesty of 2 people who had decided, before the conversations began, that they owed each other the truth regardless of where it led. Where it led was not where Marcus had anticipated. He had prepared himself, in the way careful people prepare for outcomes they have considered, for the possibility that what the evidence described was the full story. It was not the full story. The full story included 3 years of Patricia's voice in Simone's ear. 2 years of a professional environment that had used comparison as a daily instrument, and a man who had identified a specific vulnerability in a specific marriage and had moved toward it with professional precision. Damien Holt had not fallen in love with Simone. This, confirmed by the financial investigation's communication records and corroborated by the behavior pattern Oliver had documented across 3 prior similar situations in other states, was the central fact of the matter. He had identified her as a person with access to information he needed, had cultivated that access with the specific attentiveness of someone who had done this before, and had extracted what he came for. The personal dimension had been entirely instrumental. Simone understood this at day 19, when Marcus showed her the prior situations. She sat with the folder open for 6 minutes without speaking. Then she set it down and said, "He was never interested in me." "No," Marcus said. She looked at the folder again. Then she closed it. "I need some time," she said. "Yes," Marcus said. He did not ask how much or for what. He understood that she was describing a process, not a deadline. Patricia Aldrich received through Cecilia Frost's office a formal notification on day 30 that the household resources she had historically accessed through Simone, the use of a vehicle registered to Marcus, the family account that had covered 2 of her annual expenses, and the standing dinner reservation at a Buckhead restaurant that Marcus had maintained under his name for 5 years as a courtesy, were being reviewed and would be restructured pending the conclusion of the current legal proceedings. Patricia called Marcus directly, for the first time in 6 years. He let it go to voicemail. She left a message that ran to 4 minutes and 22 seconds, the content of which began with indignation and arrived, by the final 30 seconds, at something closer to the awareness that certain outcomes had followed from certain behaviors, though she did not name this directly. Marcus did not return the call. He listened to the voicemail twice. The second time to confirm he had not missed anything requiring a response. He had not. The 740 employees in the buildings Damien had attempted to use as instruments continued their work without interruption. The credit facility was unwound through the lender's legal process, the collateral release confirmed by title. And the $11.4 million property in West Midtown remained in Marcus's portfolio unencumbered as it had been before the forgery, as if the attempt had been a weather event that had passed without structural damage. The $3 million drawn from the facility was recovered through the asset freeze and subsequent civil judgment filed alongside the criminal proceedings. The remaining $4 million in undrawn capacity on the fraudulent line was terminated by the lender upon confirmation of the forgery with a letter of apology that Marcus set aside without particular feeling one way or the other. He did not ruin Damien Holt. He did not pursue every avenue available to him, and several were available. He did not contact every former client. He did not file additional civil actions beyond what the recovery required. He did not feed information to media contacts he possessed, though he possessed them. He explained this to Cecilia on day 41 when she presented a list of additional options. 740 people, he said. They need their building to function. They need their landlord to be someone who is running a portfolio, not a campaign. He set the list aside. Take what the recovery requires. Leave the rest. Cecilia noted this on her pad and closed the options list. She had expected this response, because she had been his attorney for 9 years, but she appreciated that he said it aloud. And she noted it because documentation mattered and because some things deserved to be on the record. The Shelby GT 500 was repaired at a shop in Marietta that Marcus had used for 6 years, run by a man named Coleman who had worked on cars his entire adult life and who treated every vehicle that came into his bay with the precise seriousness of someone who understood that an object's meaning is not diminished by its age. The keying had run along the driver's door from the mirror mount to the rear quarter panel, a deliberate stroke, not an accident, 5 inches in length, through the original paint that a previous restoration had preserved for 43 years. Coleman took 14 days. When Marcus picked the car up, the door was indistinguishable from the panels around it. Coleman refused the additional payment Marcus offered beyond the invoice and explained simply that the work was the work and the invoice covered it. Marcus drove the car back to the storage facility in Sandy Springs and parked it in the climate-controlled unit where it lived. He stood beside it for a moment before covering it. The car had belonged, in the abstract sense of things belonging to their time and their meaning, to the version of Russell Veen that had pointed to a magazine photograph and used the phrase "the most honest car American money ever made." Russell had meant by this something specific that the car did not pretend. Its power was not hidden, its age was not disguised. What it was, it simply was, without performance or apology. Marcus had spent his adult life operating on precisely the opposite principle. The principle of strategic concealment, of the hidden asset, of the public identity kept deliberately below the waterline of the actual one. Russell had taught him this principle too. In the form of that sentence on the inside back cover of the ledger, the moment a person knows what you have, they stop seeing you. He had spent 6 months over the preceding year wondering whether that principle had become the thing he hid behind rather than the thing he protected himself with. Whether the practice of concealment, begun as a response to Garrett and refined over 17 years, had created a life in which the people closest to him were given, by the architecture of that life, insufficient material to make genuinely informed choices. Simone, standing in the kitchen at day 47, had said something that stayed with him in the specific way that precise observations stay. "I wasn't betrayed by what you hid. I was betrayed by what I let myself not ask about." She was describing something specific about her own choices, but it was also describing something about the system the two of them had built together. A system in which certain questions were not asked because certain answers were not offered, and in which that arrangement had been, for long enough, comfortable for both of them. He could not undo the architecture of the preceding 6 years. He could decide what the next 6 would look like. Russell's ledger was on the desk in the home office, where it had been since Marcus's first night in the house. He picked it up and read the sentence on the inside back cover, for the first time in perhaps 2 years, and considered whether it was the complete principle or only the first half of one. The moment a person knows what you have, they stop seeing you. This was true. He had proved it with Garrett, and he had built 17 years on the proof. But the corollary, the part Russell had not written down because Russell had been married for 49 years to a woman who had known the full picture from the beginning, was this: the moment you withhold the whole picture from the people who have chosen to be part of your life. You ask them to make their choices in the dark, and then you hold them responsible for where they end up. He set the ledger down. He did not write anything in it. Some things you understand and then carry, rather than recording them, because recording them would make them a principle, and they are not a principle, they are just a thing that is true, specific to this life and this time, not transferable to anyone else's circumstances. The Shelby's cover settled over the chassis in the familiar way of something placed where it belongs. He locked the unit and walked to his car in the autumn evening, which was the same temperature it had been the October morning when he had first driven the car to the Doraville event and encountered, in the same room, the man who would spend the following months believing he had access to something Marcus had never been close to losing. He had not lost it. He had instead had it examined from the outside for the first time, in the specific and unflattering light that external examination always provides, and he had found certain things in need of revision. That was enough. That was more than enough. You have been with this story long enough to know that it was never really about the car. The car was 11 pounds of chrome and 43-year-old original paint and a keying stroke that ran 5 inches through a door panel. It was repaired in 14 days. That is the simple part. The rest of it, the 18 properties, the credit facility, the 43 access log entries, the forum and the FBI agents at Table 4 and Damian Holt walking out of the Grand Hyatt Ballroom at 8:31, that was also repaired. That took longer. But it was also the simple part, in the sense that it had a known mechanism and a known end state. Document, demonstrate, recover. The harder part was the ledger on the desk, the sentence on the inside back cover. The question of whether the principle that had protected Marcus Vane for 17 years had also, in a specific and unrecoverable way, cost him something. He cannot answer that question with a clean resolution. Neither can you, if you are being precise about it. Some questions about the life you are building do not resolve, they only clarify. Russell Vane built a house in Bartow County with materials purchased over 4 trips, because that was what the budget allowed. He kept a ledger on the kitchen table every Sunday and explained every line of it to a 7-year-old because he believed that understanding was the only protection. He was right about that. He was also married for 49 years to a woman who knew the full picture. He had never experienced the specific cost of withholding it. Marcus is 39 now. He still runs the same route in the mornings. He still drives the Tacoma. The Shelby goes out perhaps 5 times a year along roads where the speed limit is not the relevant consideration. The ledger is still on the desk. He has not added to it. If this story stayed with you, if something in it felt familiar, in the way that certain specific truths feel familiar even when the circumstances are entirely different from your own, then you already know what it is about. The channel is here every week. Stories like this one, real ones told straight. Subscribe and bring someone with you who needs to hear one. Have you ever kept something hidden to protect it, only to find later that the hiding was its own kind of cost? Leave that in the comments. We tell stories here because some things are only understood by being said aloud.